Hello and welcome to the Sacral Circle, where we are healing sexual trauma collectively and lovingly. I'm your host, Janie Terrazas, and I'll be interviewing individuals from all walks of life who have had to face a sexual tragedy or abuse in one form or another and triumph over their adversity. On every episode, a guest will deliver inspirational support, words of comfort, and empowering healing advice. They'll courageously share how their experiences impacted their lives and what led them to face and conquer the blockages that kept them from fully reconnecting to their inner power and divine sacredness. I want to thank our listeners for joining us today on the Sacral Circle, the self-love haven where we leave judgment at the door. And today I'm very grateful to be with this amazing individual, Joseph Brooks. Since 1986, he has worked in the health and fitness industry. He is a former fitness director and trainer to trainers, and he is the owner of Next Level Personal Training. He has been a guest speaker and keynote speaker for several women's events and nonprofits, such as the Light Up Your Awesomeness Women's Conference and Trinity Grace Fellowship. He is the creator of The Value of a Woman and Babs, Be Alert, Be Safe, a self-defense program for women. He has endured sexual and physical abuse and has overcome his adversity. He now helps other individuals deal with their grief. He has been trusted by celebrities, physicians, parents, and seniors to help them achieve overall health and well-being. Thank you so much for being with us today, Joseph. We really appreciate you, and I can't even say enough about this guy. I met him a while back. I was working on a project for empowering women, and I wanted to include a self-defense aspect to it. And when we met, he started telling me about his story and everything that he's endured and been through. You'll hear his passion and his sincerity and really helping women. And also, he's here to help men, overcome their limiting ideas and beliefs about what it means to be a man. So, you're an incredible father and husband, as well as an advocate for wellness here in our community. So I want to thank you for all that you've done.
Janie, truly humbled by what you just said. And I just thank God that he's given me the ability to do what I do. And yes, I want to help men get stronger and break through some of the things that have held us back for so long. And in doing so, I think we can help a lot of our sisters if we heal ourselves.
Absolutely. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background? I believe you grew up here in San Antonio, correct?
That's correct. I grew up on the east side of San Antonio, which is notorious for being a really bad side of town. My mother had me when she was 42 years old, and she didn't plan to have me. It was a romantic night between my dad and her, and I was a result. And my father passed away when I was 11 years old, so my mother raised me in this area of town, the east side, and it was surrounded, or we were surrounded, by a lot of violence, drugs, alcohol, abuse, and a lot of spousal abuse. I didn't witness that in my own home because my father cherished my mother, but I was surrounded by it. And my mother kept me focused so that I wouldn't get caught up in all of the elements, negative elements in our neighborhood.
Yeah, that's not an easy feat. And even though, it's funny, if you were to ever see Joseph, how tall are you? You're like this huge, big guy.
6'1", I'm little.
You seem like even taller. I thought you were like 6'4" or something. I'm really tiny, so you seem extra big. But he has the appearance of someone that's really intimidating, but you really are a very heart-centered, soft, sensitive being. And you've always been like that really since you were a kid, but you were around such roughness.
Yes.
What was that like? And then tell us a little bit about, that first experience that you had. I believe you've endured sex trauma as well as physical abuse.
It was tough because, like I said, my father passed when I was 11 years old. So my mother raised me, and my mother was very stern. She didn't mince words. she gave me instruction, and I was to obey the instruction. She told me that just because I grew up on the east side, that I wouldn't speak or act like the kids that I grew up with, that she held me to a higher standard. And she said it once, and she commanded that respect. But around that area, when I was in junior high school, I was bullied severely every day. It was really intense. I was physically abused on a daily basis. I remember being in gym class, and we had about 100 kids in class, and an athlete came up to me. He was a star athlete, and he just looked me in the eyes, and he spit in my face. And all of the kids started to laugh. I mean, the PE teacher started to laugh, and I just wiped that spit from my face and took it. And you know, Janie, when you go through situations like that, it could do one or two things. It could strengthen you, or it could destroy you. What helped me get through situations like that, because one thing I did not do, I didn't tell my mother these things were happening because I didn't want to concern her. And what I would do is I watched TV shows like The Wonderful World of Disney or Lifestyles of the Rich and the Famous, or what that did was gave me a mental focus that there was something better, so that every day when someone was slapping me or laughing at me or pushing me down or kicking my lunch off the table when I was trying to eat lunch, I mean, it was really intense, but I focused on the positives, and that helped me get through those tough times. Also, when I was younger, I was about 7 years old, and my mother would go to work. She left me with a friend of hers who was to babysit me. And during that time, I was abused physically and sexually, and I never told my mother that, ever. She went to her grave not knowing any of this. And this is the first time I'm really sharing this with anyone. During that time that I was being sexually abused, it's really difficult for a boy or young man or a man to ever admit that. You go through a myriad of emotions. You ask yourself, or I did I welcome that? Was that part of my fault? Did I lead them on? Or is that to be expected? So I had all these myriad of thoughts and emotions, but yet I never had any resentment. I never had any anger. I was confused. And later on, that would manifest as a little depression because I didn't know where I fit. And I didn't know if this was the norm. And after that, I had an experience where I spent the night with a family member, and the same thing happened. So you wonder, this is family and they're doing this to me.
Wow.
Am I bringing this into myself? I carried this for many, many years because as a young man, who am I going to tell? And you hold this close to your vest. And when I went to junior high, I took the bullying. Part of it was the same thought pattern I had when I was being sexually abused, that maybe I'm doing something to warrant this. Maybe this is what's supposed to happen. And so I took that upon myself as just, this is Joseph. This is what you deserve. And this is what you're going to get. And this is what life looks like for you.
In terms of the trauma that you faced as a child, was this a recurring thing with the woman that was babysitting you? Like, how long did that last for? And the incident with the family member, was that a one-time thing? And was that somebody that you know what I mean, that you had to continue to see? Yeah.
That's a very good question. And in both instances, as far as the babysitter that I was staying with, that went on about 3 months. And previous to that, I was in a daycare center. And I think I was 4 or 5. And that's where the very first experience happened. And never told my mom. So I would have to still see my family members at family events. And they would give me this look like, you better not say anything. And so I did.
These were women that abused you, even in the daycare, or was it ever a male that was doing it to you?
Male and female, both.
Oh, wow. So oh my goodness.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
And and I still had that same process. They made it seem like it was a game, and so when my mother would pick me up after school, they'd walk me to the door, say, Joseph had a good day today, and that was it. And I never mentioned it after that, and up until right now. And so my father, my mother, no one knew what happened. And like I said, this is the first time I shared, and going to those family events and knowing what happened. And with my family, that happened over the course of maybe 3 or 4 years. And it was tough. It was because you're holding on to all of that. And it's just no outlet. And when I went into high school, I discovered weight training. And I took my sadness and depression to the weight room. And I began to transform my physique and get stronger. But during this time, Janie, one thing happened. I got angry. I began to think back of what happened to me, and I began to get angry and resentful.
Mm-hmm.
And then I wanted to hurt people
Mm-hmm.
because I'd been hurt.
Yes.
And now, because I've gotten stronger and I've gotten bigger and now I can hurt people.
That's very true. And you bring up a really good point. Over time, there is a rage that builds within us for those of us that have been sexually traumatized, like when it's not processed properly and we're not able to fully integrate and make sense of these emotions and things of that sort. And
Right.
and for a lot of people, you're right, they do end up projecting that pain either onto themselves, onto others, and depending on how long they've endured pain of that nature will dictate their level of self-loathing, and that disconnect from goodness. And so you just want to spit that poison out sometimes. And that's why I always tell people, those of us, when we see people who are projecting pain onto others, it's because they truly have it within themselves. If they're killing
Right.
somebody, if they're raping somebody, it's like they have this just rage and sadness inside that hasn't really been understood and or resolved and or healed, So I really,
Exactly.
so when, like you said, you had the strength, you had the brawn, now you had all this rage and this anger. Did you end up sort of going down that path for a while?
I did. My parents raised me. I was really a good kid. They raised me really well. They never argued in front of me. They never fought. I had this love in my heart. And when it was betrayed at a young age, I just held on to so much. And so what I did was I said, okay, I was hurt, so I'm going to hurt someone else. And I began to date girls or take girls out just as trophies.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas before, my heart was pliable and all I wanted was to care for girls and women like my dad cared for my mother.
Right.
But at this point, I was so enraged and there was no one to talk to. And so I became what you consider a bad boy.
Mm-hmm.
And I did bad things. I got into fights. I would walk up to guys when they were with their girlfriend and I'd challenge him to defend her, or I'd take her. I mean, I was bad.
Yeah.
And I continued that, as I got bigger and stronger, and I continued that life until about the time I was a senior in high school, and my mother passed away. And during that time, I went into a deep depression, and I would drink myself to sleep. I mean, I would fill up on beer and liquor and just drink myself to sleep every day until a critical point happened in my life where I was sitting on the edge of my bed and I drank myself into a stupor, and I had a 9mm Glock, and I checked the Glock to make sure there was a bullet in the chamber. I put it under my chin and pulled the trigger. And the gun didn't go off, obviously. Now, most people would say, wow, that was a wake-up call. For me, I went into a deeper depression because I couldn't even get that right. And so I beat myself up about that. And I went back to what had been my saving grace before. I went and I just spent my time in the weight room, and I sought after God. You know, I'd learned about God growing up. My mother was a church pianist, and she'd take me to church. I never wanted to go, but she took me anyway. And I sought after God, and I said, there has to be more than this, than being depressed, than being angry, than hurting people. It wasn't even in my nature. And I prayed. The only way I knew how was a short prayer. I prayed. I stopped drinking. I spent time in the weight room, and I began to change myself. And about the time that I was cleaning up, I met a wonderful young lady, and I saw her, and I knew she was supposed to be my wife. And when I first saw her and I began to talk to her, I went out the first week and I bought a diamond ring, and I said, will you marry me? And she said, no, you're messed up. You're going to have to wait. So we dated, and during that time, she invited me to church, and I walked into her church, Janie, and the Spirit of the Lord hit me. It was what I had always been missing. I had a void in my heart. I had a hole in my chest. And when I walked into this church, the Spirit of God hit me, and it transformed me. And nothing had ever affected me like that. And I just, oh my gosh, that felt so good. The peace that I sought after, the pain that I had was just gone. And God began to work on me and work on me and work on me until I was transformed. And my wife will tell you I'm not perfect by any means, but I've gotten a lot better. And although you go through the mental aspects of those things that happened in the past, I'm able to overcome those things because I know that God's Spirit moved on the inside of me, and He cleans those things. And His word says that when He sees us, we're white as snow. So as dirty as I felt back then, I know that in my Father's eyes, I'm white as snow. So that keeps me free. It keeps a smile on my face. It keeps me happy. And so, yeah, I just went through a really traumatic time, but there's hope. There's hope. And had I ended that journey for hope on the side of that bed that night, I wouldn't be speaking to you, and I wouldn't have had this wonderful family, and I wouldn't have known there was a hope and an escape and a way out.
You know, when people endure that much suffering, especially as a child, it's very easy for us to fall into the trap of hopelessness and helplessness. And luckily for you, right, I always tell people what you seek, you shall find. And right. Even though the light was so dim, like you just realized, well, there's got to be something more to life than this misery and suffering. And the right people and the right things came to you. But you also surrendered, you know, and that's a big part of that. Is
that's huge.
Yeah. You mentioned how for a period in your life you were definitely projecting this frustration and this pain and anger, and you started to kind of get that under control. But how did it affect you? And you don't have to answer this, but sexually, how did it affect you? Did it disconnect you from your sexuality? Did it heighten it?
That's a very good question. It heightened it. And I did some things. I wanted to prove to myself that what I was brought up to think in the neighborhood a man is how many trophies can you collect? And trophies to us were women. How many can you sleep with? How many? And for me, that was how I projected my anger, my resentment, my just trying to get in touch with who I was. And I did things I'm totally ashamed of that I should have never done. I stripped in clubs. I did whatever I could to get back at these women. And the women they didn't even hurt me. But in my view, they were a source of pain. Yeah. And this was my way of getting back. And each time, though, Janie, I would go out with a woman. I knew my intent, and they weren't good. And I knew in my heart, this is wrong. And even while I was doing things, I was like, I shouldn't be doing this. but it didn't stop me. It was just like I'm fighting my spirit and my body. And, thank God I met my wife, because when we were dating, she said, you go back, after I'd given my life to the Lord, she said, you go back to those women that you hurt and you ask them for forgiveness. And I was like, I'm not doing that. I mean, that's, wow. And she said, I'm asking you to do that. And so the women that I hurt over the course of my life, sexually, emotionally, I had to go back and humble myself and ask them to forgive me. Some of them wanted to cut my throat. The others looked at me like, no one ever does that. Wow. And I had to ask for forgiveness for their healing, my healing, and so that we could heal together. Some forgave, some didn't. But I knew that I had to do that, and I did my part in doing so. And I repented before God and asked him to forgive me for what I'd done. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it definitely heightened it. And I was out of control. I was just totally out of control.
Now you have daughters.
Oh, gosh.
Share a little bit about that dialogue that you've had with your daughters in terms of what you've learned through your own life.
Well, one thing my wife and I committed to doing, we're going to be totally honest with our kids. And sometimes, oh, Lord, you don't want to hear a lot of the stuff. But I sat down with them and I shared my book with them. And it was not a pleasant book. It was my life. And I told them just like I'm telling you, what I'd done, what I'd been through. And they are able to come to us with anything and tell us anything. And especially with my girls, I told them what to look out for, because I was that not so nice guy. And I understood the motives of men and boys and what they were after many times. And I sat down with them and spoke to my daughters about that. And because of that, they become really strong women. Sometimes I feel bad for the guys because they have such high standards. But
we need that. And I think it's important for men to also be sharing that message.
Of course.
For us to heal all of this, and all of these disharmonies and this battle, the sexes that's going on, and the disrespect that genders have for one another. Right? Like, we kind of had to take ownership of how are we enabling this? How are we a part of this? And men and women both have to find that self-love and that centeredness. And kind of like you said, go into that space of the psyche, the mental, emotional places, and figure out, why do I have so much disdain towards them?
Exactly. And, typically you're going to find at the root, anytime there's a disdain towards the opposite sex, something happened years and years ago. And this is just a result of what that root was. So until we uncover the root, because honestly, Janie, I thank you for what you're doing, because you're not going to hear this in church or schools or anywhere. No one wants to talk about it.
I know.
But it's a subject that needs to be exposed.
Not a lot of people want to really look at the wound for what it really is, because it's too gross. But
that's right.
It's the only way we're going to heal it. And you also are involved in the community through your pastor work.
That's correct. And the thing about it is, they say you never have a testimony without a test. And I've been tested a lot. And about 20 years ago, when I gave my life to the Lord, I was ordained as a minister through our church. And, when you're ordained like that, you have a huge responsibility, because people are always looking at you or looking to you. And now you're carrying a mantle for God. You're his representative. And in so doing, I'm able to share the pain that I've been through and the deliverance I've come from to help so many people heal. And, Janie, it's like people just come into my life, and it's like God compels me to speak to them. Oftentimes I'm like, really? But I begin to speak to them and find out that they've had roots like I've had roots, and they've been holding on to some things. I had one young man, he walks up to me one day and he said, I saw you a couple of days ago and you smiled at me. And he said, I was on my way to blow my brains out. And because you smiled at me, I just wanted to come back and tell you thank you. Now, no words were shared with this young man. I just saw him and I smiled. The reason I was able to smile is the joy of the Lord is on the inside of me. I know where he's brought me from. I was really low, and he's brought me into his light. And so I try to share that light, and it's a great thing because I count it as part of my life to make people happy, whether that's walking through the grocery store or at a movie, to smile, to encourage, to inspire, to uplift. It's what I'm called to do. And so that's part of ministry, and it's part of my mission. Many people travel across the world to mission fields. Well, my mission field is HEB and the donut shop. So, it's just because they're broken people there, right?
Yes, absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why I really lit up when I was around Joseph, because I could just feel like we were from the same soul tribe. We have a very similar mission and vision and understanding about what it means to be a beacon of light, and how it's in our day-to-day walk that is a part of ministry. Like, I feel like I have like a mindfulness ministry, and I think that we're here to be inspiration igniters. There's a lot of us that are compelled to just deliver kindness whenever possible, because it's true. You never know how just smiling at somebody could have an impact to the point where they were thinking about taking their life, and you gave them reason, you gave them purpose to not do it. And so never underestimate the value of kindness or a compliment or a smile, or if you feel this strange desire, like you're in front of a stranger and you get that whisper to like, tell them everything's going to be okay, or tell them they're doing a good job. And it's like, the more you listen to it, the more you realize, you really can be a superhero for love. That's what I believe. And I believe you're a superhero for love. When he was talking about smiling earlier, I'm not even kidding. When you're around him, you can't help but to want to smile, because he smiles like with his whole body, and he carries this light. Like, there's no way that you cannot feel joy oozing out of this person when you're around you. So I want to thank you for carrying that Christ-like vibrancy, wherever you go, and for being one of the bold pastors that's open to sharing their dark side, because all of us have shadows. All of us have a quote unquote dark side to us, but we also have the light and the divinity, and you've been able to tap into that and then use it to resurrect and to heal your shadows, because, I want other people to know that that's possible, and that God sees you like white snow,
Yes, he does.
I wish we had more time, because we could go into depth about all of the work that he's doing in town with this like bullying stuff and his fitness and his life coaching and all the things that you do. But, tell them where they can go find you, either on social media or the website, so they can learn more about you. And if they're interested in contacting you for services or anything like that, they know how to connect.
Sure. Thank you so much. You can go to our website, www.gotothenextlevel.net, and also my email, jbnextlevel@yahoo.com. And you can leave any information, even if you just want a prayer for the day. You could send that, and I'll pray over your request. Or if you have any questions or concerns, you can send me an email. And also, I'm going to leave my number. It's 210-908-1490. And I'm here for you. And that's what I'm here to do, and to help, encourage, inspire, and uplift you. And Janie, thank you so much.
Yes. Oh, thank you. Joseph and I are looking forward to creating like an actual community here in San Antonio, a safe space for men to come and really start addressing these issues and helping them understand from a psychological, physiological, neurological, perspective, why we got into the mess that we're in, why they feel and think what they do, and then giving them practical tools and a beautiful space of healing and acceptance where they can, again, expose themselves, quote unquote, and really finally just like shed that poison that keeps them in a mental enslaved state. So I'm looking forward to that. And I want to thank you for always supporting my endeavors and for championing the feminine and really stepping into your divine kingness.
Oh, thank you so much, Janie. I'm excited. Y'all are my sisters. I have to protect you. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. And now you are officially a part of the Sacral Circle. And I want to thank all of our beautiful listeners for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to the Sacred Stories podcast on iTunes, where you'll find other impactful and inspiring shows. Connect with me via our social media pages. You'll find us at the Sacral Circle. Your shares and likes are greatly appreciated because they help spread the love. If you have any questions about my coaching and healing services, visit my website at JanieTerrazas.com. As we say goodbye, always remember to know your worth and continue to love and value yourself wholeheartedly. Peace be with you.